Sorry about that. No.
So, Dr. Joachim, you might have gotten my note, you might have heard from her, but there is one board member who's sick.
Okay.
And you can, once you call the meeting to order, you can ask for a vote to allow her to participate virtually per the bylaws. Illness is one of the reasons a person can participate virtually. Hi.
I know, right? Nice to see you. Oh, is that on? Oh, there you go. Perfect. So with that, I will call the Champaign County Mental Health Board meeting, May 17th, 2023 to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Matt Hausman,
Here.
Daphne Maurer,
Here on the phone.
Molly McClay,
Here.
Joe Omosage,
Here.
Elaine Palencia,
Here.
Jen Straub, Jane Sprandel,
Here.
John Paul Joachim.
Here. With that, since we have a person that is ill, I will, do we do that first or roll call first?
I think you can
Do this first.
Make the motion now
Okay.
to do that.
So since we have someone that is ill, I will move for a motion to allow them to participate via Zoom. Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, with that, can I get a roll call, please?
John, since you're in person now, you only have to do roll call votes when it comes to money, but I can go ahead and do this.
Right now, it's okay. I can do it as a voice vote. All those say aye.
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 All those opposed? The ayes have it. So Daphne can do the board meeting via Zoom. All right, with that, I guess we have to do move to roll call.
You just did it.
I guess we just did that. Oh, yeah, sorry. So I guess we'll approval of the agenda. So can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
All right, do I have a second?
I second.
With that, can I get a roll call, please? Voice. Oh, sorry, voice. That's right. Thank you. Those who approve, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, all right, the ayes have it. So the next portion is the citizen input and public participation. All those all those are welcome to attend the board meeting and offer thoughts during this time. We'll limit participation to 5 minutes per person, 20 minutes total. If there's anyone here now that would like to make a comment, now's the time. All right.
We have maybe folks on the Zoom.
So are agencies allowed to participate via Zoom? Okay,
Well,
just not.
For public input, I think, yes. for
Okay,
sure.
okay.
Oh,
All right.
maybe I should let us see who's here. Okay.
Well, I can just see right there. There's not, like you said, there's not that many, so
Okay.
we can see everybody up there. All right. With that, I'll move on to my comments. Obviously, today we're doing the study session, and we're going to be going over the funding requests and the summaries and recommendations. So, we're going to have a long, thorough discussion, I expect, about all of this. This year's definitely a tough decision or many tough decisions on what we are going to be able to allocate funding to and how we're going to allocate funding so that we can cover as much as we can and serve the population as best as we can. So those are just my comments. We'll move on to Lynn's comments.
Thank you. And usually during a study session, I try not to make comments, but because of the nature of this one, I have a few comments to make. There is a draft in here of our staff recommendations for funding. This is something we started doing a few years ago to show the board what we're likely to recommend before you have a meeting where you have to vote on it. And the reason was that Ms. Palencia will remember those conversations used to be very long at the board meetings. So I don't know if this process is super helpful, but the idea is to give you a little more time to talk about anything that's in the staff recommendations that you disagree with or that you have questions about. I think this set of recommendations gives you plenty to hate. Like this was really, I know this was hard for board members. It's been very hard for staff. This is the most important thing that we do in a year. And we spent a lot of time reading and analyzing the applications to give you some details, but really like the bottom line is this was a great group of applications, even where there are flaws. We were provided with clarifications later. These are all agencies that, for the most part, these are agencies that we know, and it's a small enough town that we have some confidence in their work, and they're trying to address, you know, understood needs of the community. So the theme of this set of recommendations is to spread the pain. I hate approaching it that way, but there really didn't seem to be a better way to do it when we're $975,000 shy of the goal. So there are some, in my spread the pain draft here, some things are recommended for full funding, but a lot are recommended for partial funding, including just continuing with the level of funding from this year. And that is, it's hard because we know prices of everything are going up. So this could be a really difficult scenario for everyone, even where there are small partial reductions from what was requested. But especially if an agency seems to have other potential sources of funding, whether through many other funding streams or a healthy foundation fund or, you know, great fundraising efforts, or if they could wait on whatever expansion they might have proposed. So, you know, especially if staff haven't been hired. But unfortunately, a lot of the requests that have been brought to you this year are to continue programs that already exist, which have lost other sources of funding. So that's really different from previous years. And we knew it was going to happen, like a very slow moving train wreck. Here it is. So, you know, the idea was to keep as many options as possible, and it might not work. And then there is always a chance of additional. So we're looking at an early projection of 2024 revenue. It's based on the very earliest projection of increase in property tax levy. And that's always, for the last 7 years since Tammy Ogden came here, that's always a fairly conservative first estimate. In July, August, or September, she is likely to give me an increased estimate, but I don't know. It's also possible that just as in 2009, there will be a, you know, big enough bank failure that we start to have a constricting economy instead, and then our 2024 predictions might change a lot. So I can't say, yeah, go ahead and spend the $50,000 or $60,000 more that you are likely to have, because that's based on previous years and this year hasn't happened yet. So this scenario of recommendations is our attempt to present you with something that looks affordable, because that's what we're responsible to do. If there is additional funding, there are some recommendations for deferral in here to such time when we know there's additional funding. And in this draft, in your study session packet, the amount that I suggested we hold back was, let's see if I can find that number, was 29,000. Just you could spend 29,000 more, but there are so many things recommended for deferral or for partial funding that 29,000 would disappear fast if we were trying to split it up and spend it right now. But you could do that. So since I sent this out to y'all, I got some feedback already on a logical inconsistency in some of the recommendations. So for May 24, I would like to offer a slightly different recommendation that is related to Macy, because we do have their audit, but we have some outstanding questions that we haven't even started to work on with them. So I'd like to recommend deferral for those two applications. You know, and they're very small amounts of funding. So that also, we learned that Macy has $7 million on hand. So maybe they can afford to go without this money for a while. So that's one substantial change from the scenario that's in front of you. And then the other thing is I started to hear back from quite a few people about the importance of fully funding the Uniting Pride request, because there is no other agency like that in this community or in the region, and the need seems to be growing right now and maybe likely to continue growing. And to be fair, every question I had about that application was fully answered, and every question I had about their audit was also fully answered. So there's really not, and they don't have a lot of other great funding sources, funding options other than their fundraising events, which you never know how that's going to go. So I will change the staff recommendation for that one to full funding. And then you would end up with a shortfall. Let's see, it's not very different. The amount of money not spent would be, it's like 24,000, something like, yeah, 28,000. So I spent $1,000 in that. So anyway, I should stop talking and let you get into this, but I just wanted to let you know that I've already had some really healthy feedback from board members and tried to incorporate it in what I think we will do next. So that said, I need to stop talking. And maybe what I should put on the screen is the request.
All right.
I'm sorry, I think that's it.
Thanks, Lynn. With that, we'll move on to new business, which is the Mental Health Board PY24 funding requests. Obviously, we've all looked at this many times. And then with that, we can go on to the correction of errors in the draft on pages 4 through 7. And I think when we were presenting some of these programs, these corrections came up in the discussion as well. Are there any questions or comments on that? All right, with that, we can go on to part C, which is the staff recommendations for PY 2024 funding. So going through the list of recommendations from the staff, I guess if you counted Mohammed's recommendations without the deferral, it comes to about 581,000-ish, plus or minus some. And then I guess with the deferrals of the recommendation for other deferrals, it comes out to the 987-ish in the amount of money that we would be deferring. But obviously this is the time to kind of discuss and put your input in what you think about the recommendations, what adjustments or different choices you would make.
Just a general question, Lynn. And you might have mentioned it, but I didn't catch it. When you were doing, since you were spreading the pain, did you get some agency input from that during the discussions with them, or is this basically just the staff doing it?
This is mostly staff. We have had agency questions before and since. I got quite a long email from a new applicant, which is the Immigrant Services of CU, just really like making their case. It was actually, we got 2 such emails, just like very nicely written, great arguments. And their concerns actually kind of spiked my concern about what happens when agencies have to compete for scarce resources, whether it's money or staff, that, they have no choice but to be competitive and to question, why somebody else is getting so much funding and they're not, so I thought like, oh, wow, I have to be very careful about how we do this. So we did. And then, today we've had some questions from people like, why are you recommending us for less than we asked? And those are really good questions. It's really hard to, yeah.
I wonder if we ought to make that a little clearer. I've said that to you at the beginning of this process that, and I hope that doesn't mean that we get inflated applications to make, to account for that. That's the other problem. But we can't ever guarantee, we shouldn't ever guarantee that an applicant gets what they ask for. And that has to be part of the understanding. And I don't know that we really talked about that maybe enough earlier at the beginning, but it should maybe go into even writing. If it isn't, surely it's there somewhere. But if it isn't, just on the basic instructions that agencies get at the beginning of the process, that full funding is not guaranteed for any application.
Yeah, off that, in my experience doing grant applications, sometimes there is what is the impact if it's funded at 75% or something like that. That might be a worthwhile if we're looking at that. That if to kind of take that into consideration.
I guess my only thought is, if we do fund some of these for less, obviously some will be able to manage and be able to do the program. I'm not sure if others can or cannot, because maybe the money is for a position, and if you can't pay a certain amount, no one's going to apply for that job and be hired. So, that being said, then if that falls through and they can't take less, then that money could be then used for programs that we're deferring money, or we're deferring for the audit. The other thing that I am concerned about is, the ones that are waiting for an audit, obviously, some of them obviously we do want to fund these, but if we don't have money left over, then what happens to them? Some of these we have funded in the past, and if we don't fund them, what happens to the program? So I don't think there's an easy answer, but I'd like to see what everyone else has to say.
Well, do I understand that we have got $28,000 to play with? And then outside of that, anything we would award extra would take money away from another agency, right?
Do you mean anything we would award from that 28,000?
No, but if we were to say, well, we'd like to give somebody full funding, and it would take money away from another agency. So there's that to consider. But we do have 28,000 that is in play, right? Okay.
But just correct me if I'm wrong. For the ones that we're waiting for deferral, if we use that 20,000, say right now, there's no money left for them at all, correct?
Right, unless there's a big increase predicted for 2024. Like right now, the projection is 5%. So, for 2023, we started with a 5% projection and ended up getting 8%. So, and I wasn't expecting that. So that was a lot more money, but it's not enough to fund all of the things that are recommended for deferral. So we will have to have if we get more money and we get enough information in time for those without current audits, then we can include it in an upcoming meeting, maybe July or September. It's probably more likely to be September, and you'd have another decision process, which we haven't ever done that. Well, maybe we did when we got ARPA funds from the county. We did. But so that it's very unusual to have two meetings about decisions for agency allocations, but that's what we could do.
But then what you're saying is the 28,000 really is not in play. It's been promised. No, it's not the deferral money. That's sort of.
The deferral holds no promises.
Okay. Okay. All right.
So just for clarity, there is no money reserved for deferral right now. So if we want to save money for one of these or for a program for deferral, that's something we should kind of plan for.
This is a really awful thing to bring up, but in 2020 and 2021, I mentioned in our decision memo that it's, and these were for PY 21 and PY 22, that it appeared quite safe to spend more than you had because agencies were getting all this extra money related to COVID, but also still looking at staffing shortages. And by our rules, they would have to return money to the mental health board from underspending or over, or over grants, surplus revenue. So then when an audit doesn't come, it's not due till 6 months after that, and then it's still later than that, 6 months later. So a year later, I'm getting an audit, and you're well into the decisions about 2 years later from that. If it looks like a whole bunch of money wasn't spent, and therefore some might be due back to the mental health board, our expectation per the rules is that money is returned. But I have had very limited success with that because sometimes, there's no one left at the agency who knows what happened, or there isn't, it might be that money could not have been spent on the services for the mental health board. So a lot less came back than I expected for those 2 years. And especially when the audits were quite late. So it's not the easy extra money that I was counting on. So I won't do that again. I feel, like everyone gave me a pretty good reason why they couldn't return any money. We got all of that documented. That's fine. Family Service did return a bunch of money. Thank you. It was Ms. Cheryl Bouch sent a check right away. DSC also returns money. So, but it's very unusual for that strategy to work out. So I'm not gonna recommend that you spend more than it appears you will have. I'm not doing it this year, and I probably won't again because it just didn't work out as well as I thought.
Okay, so I have a question. If someone in, fiscal year 21 owed us back $50,000 and we've yet to see that, are they no longer eligible to get any funding? Okay, I just wanted to ensure that was the case. Thank you.
But it turns out to be a much more complicated question than I thought it was. And there actually turn out to be some valid reasons why money isn't coming back. It's like, especially if they can show me that its purposes were restricted to things outside of the contract, then we're fine. Then they don't owe us anything. But it's a question that takes a long time to answer. So we don't have money back to budget it when I thought we would. It's just not the windfall I thought. This is a public trust fund, and that the purpose of those requirements is that the money is only spent in certain limited ways, and then it comes back if it's not spent that way. But it's monitoring that has turned out to be, quite a challenge. But yeah, if it's clear that it was owed and it doesn't come back, they're not eligible.
And then can you just to go over again, which applications were late submissions? Because I remember Don Moyer Boys and Girls Club.
The Christian Health Center, Macy, Don Moyer, and Family Service.
Okay.
And everybody's reasons were pretty different. There were different challenges.
So I guess the question I would ask to the group is, as you guys look through the recommendations, is there anything different that you would suggest? I'll just put it out there. I would hold off on funding Mahama Area Youth Club this year. I think, we have to follow up on the audit. It seems like there may be other organizations that may need the money this year more than they do at this time. If in the future there is a need, we can always readdress that and fund them in the future. But that would be one of my thoughts, to either use that money for other agencies that we're deferring audits for, or deferring until the audit comes in, or other agencies that need funding.
So I have a question. Were we just going to kind of go agency by agency? Can we maybe do that just to kind of, and some may take just a minute to be like, yeah, they've got all their ducks in a row, but just
Yeah.
my brain, I'd
Mhm.
probably rather go in
think that's a good
order,
idea.
but I'm just
Yeah.
one person.
Can I ask a
Hmm.
clarification point before we start that,
Yeah.
which is, Lynn, I guess, could you walk through for the agencies that there's been a potential recommendation to defer due to audit related reasons? Could you walk through those specific agencies and if there's been any updates from them recently?
Yes.
And that might be a good opportunity to kind of say they were late getting it in,
Mhm.
they have late audits. That's maybe why staff has come with the recommendation they have. But then it might be like, hey, they don't have 7 million in reserves or something. So
Mhm.
that might
Yeah.
help us with our conversation.
I think as we get to each one, yeah, you can bring it up. So I think the first one then would be the CCRPC Youth Assessment Center for $76,350. And so the staff recommended funding at the annual level and offering a 2-year contract for that.
This recommendation was easy because they haven't asked for an increase in a few years. And when it's underspent, they send back the money quite quickly based on the fourth quarter financial. They don't wait for the audit because their audit is the same as our audit. It's the county's audit. So that one they weren't asking for an increase anyway. And we're pretty confident that we can go down the hall and ask them why they're underspent. And like, can I just keep talking and talking because I had a lot of caffeine today? There is some really great stuff going on at the Youth Assessment Center, and shame on me, I never expected it to be as good as what I've seen recently. I just hope that they can keep on that track. I don't know if you've gone to their meetings, but I'm just very happy about them right now. So that one was easy. Sorry.
Were there any other comments about this program?
Just question, is that why with the 2-year term? And I'm kind of curious if there's any of those 2-year terms, kind of the rationale.
So 2-year terms, so we put 2-year terms on a lot, partly so that we won't be reviewing as many applications next year, but also because it holds that level. If the agency accepts it, they get the same amount next year. So it's a little bit of a risk for them to accept a 2-year term, which is why it says offer a 2-year term. And so not a program that's very new, since we don't know what's going on. They might not know what's going on, but for more established programs, we're recommending 2-year terms. So.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we can go on to the Chris Healthy Aging, Improving Family Caregiver Mental Health. This is a new application that we haven't funded before. It would be 45% of the total program revenue. The recommendation by staff was not to fund it due to affordability and defer for considerations with the IDD Special Initiatives funding. I think Elaine, you presented this one, didn't you? Or
I think I did, yeah. And my only question now would be that we know the Special Initiatives Fund is a finite amount of money, right? So it can't always be funded by that money, but on the other hand, it's a good use of that money as long as it's here. And so in a way, you're kicking the can down the road, but sort of like the ARPA funding. But I mean, I think it looks like a good program that should be funded somehow. So if that money is used that way this year, I think that's fine and a good use of it.
And I think just like what Elaine said earlier is just knowing that because an agency gets funding for a program this year doesn't mean that it's guaranteed in following years. So I know it's easier said than done. And it's always hard when we can't fund. I think this is probably the first year we weren't able to fund since I've been here, an agency fully once we've approved funding. So it's definitely a tough decision this year.
I shouldn't butt in a lot. So on this one, if it were funded through the DD special initiatives, it would actually have to be modified a little bit. Are you or everybody comfortable with that idea?
Could you say more about that? I don't really understand what you mean yet.
The focus would have to be on people with intellectual developmental disabilities and their caregivers. And the focus right now was not on that. It was more on unpaid care providers of people with dementia. So, but we just happen to have a crisis in this community of unpaid caregivers of people with DD and dementia. So we were thinking like, oh, could we carve this? But what they were asking for here was funding to substitute for funding that they lost for this program. So it is kind of a big denial. And, you know, obviously like there's maybe too much pain in some places, but we had initial conversations with them about their willingness to revise the application to focus on that group. And they seemed willing. They may not be, but they may not want to take the time, but it would be deferral means they would basically have to like propose something a little bit different, and then both boards would have to approve it. But the money is there. This isn't like deferral until there's other money. So, anyway, so it's.
We can move on to the See You at Home shelter case management program. There was a large increase in the request for funding this year of $403,000. Previous year was $256,000. Our funding would make, if we funded fully, would be 75% of the total program revenue. The recommendation by staff was to fund at the previous PY23 level, which would be obviously about $150,000 less than the requested this year. I think from my perspective, obviously if we had an abundance of funding, I would love to fund it fully, but it's just such a big increase and it would be taking away from other agencies. I think that we'd need to definitely fund. So I agree with the recommendation, but I'm happy to hear what other people have to say.
I think this is a hard one also because I think See You at Home has done some phenomenal things in the last few years to help our, homeless individuals. Again, it's not like we're saying no to any money, but it's a hard reality that we have to live within our means. And again, maybe we'll win the federal lottery or something and lots of money will just come in, but I guess we do have to share the pain, unfortunately.
Was the request was that solely to cover expansion of staff that have not yet been hired?
It's been a minute, but I think so. Do you remember, Chandra? This was actually a pretty good application. It's just it's an agency which is new to us. So, this is the first year. We haven't even seen results from the first year. So I wasn't really comfortable with this great of an increase and without seeing an audit, but there's nothing wrong with their reporting. There was nothing wrong with the application, but to my recollection, this was for new pieces of the program, some technology, and then at least a couple new positions. But I think one of you, maybe Joe, observed that the salaries that they were requesting were quite appropriate for this kind of work. It was like, we spend a lot of time pounding the table and you got to pay people to do this crisis work. And so this was a very well done application. It was a little hard to say no to it, but that is a really big increase and a big chunk. So
it is for new staff. I found it in our so the additional funding is requesting primarily to cover new staff. So that's what, and they have a new building, right? They moved into a new building. So I think it all has to do with that they have a different, whole different operation than they did in a way in terms of, so that's what that's about.
You know, the thing I remember that really stood out was the total agency budget proposed was a substantial deficit because they were going to use savings to fund some stuff. I thought, what a smart move. Thank you. So I, don't mean to like pile on them after they've made all the right moves, but it was really simply because this is such a big increase.
I would say, I love See You at Home. I work with them on a very regular basis in my daily life. Their programming looks a lot different than it did just a couple of years ago. They're no longer running the emergency shelter. Things look very different. So I can't speak a lot to their current budget. But I will say that they've always impressed me as an agency in our community that has an incredible capacity for fundraising. And they've done a great job of that, which is not something they should be penalized for. And in a perfect world, I would love for them to have full funding, because goodness knows we have issues with folks experiencing homelessness, and they do a great job with that. But I agree that we're all feeling the pain, and unfortunately, cuts will need to be made.
All right. With that, we can go on to See You Early. This was a new request for $77,000, about 16% of the total program revenue. The recommendation was to fund at the request level, with $4,043 for DD. Now I can't remember. Is this the one where they're hiring a person with Spanish speaking and other language capabilities, correct? Yeah. I mean, obviously this is serving more of a hard to reach population. These are a lot of families with, usually kids who may have delays and need assistance and need advocacy through the education system and the medical system. So
I thought this is not a new staff person, but they're losing funding for one of the staff people.
Yeah, this is one where there was a cut in funding so they're trying to find new funding.
yes. Thank you for that correction.
I appreciate that of this application, despite the fact that they are losing funding from the state, which is disturbing to me, that the application is still like only 16 that they've made to us is only 16% of their total program revenue. So they do have other funding sources that are coming in to support them, and that this has been a longstanding program in the community, despite it being a new request to us.
All right, if there's no other comments or questions, we can go on to the Champaign County Advocacy Center, Children's Advocacy, for a request of $63,911, 20% of the total program revenue. This is to fund at the requested annual level and offering a 2-year term. I don't know, Lynn, if you wanted to comment on that.
This is one of the 2 agencies hit pretty hard by the loss of the victims of crime funding. And it's not a huge increase from the level that they've been at. And this is another organization where we're pretty comfortable asking them if they want a 2-year term, because again, because they're with the county. We don't wait for an audit. We just wait for that 4th quarter financial statement. And they have returned money in the past, but I think this year they were actually overspent, not underspent. So, I mean, they actually might have gotten additional ARPA money, maybe. Jen, I don't know if you remember that. Did they get extra ARPA money to do some work in the space and with counselors? This was,
I don't know the answer to that offhand. Sorry.
well, I know they were gonna ask for it, but this is one where we have just had a contract with them for so long, and we have just, at least the staff have a lot of confidence in this contract. So it is recommended right now, at least at the full amount and for 2 years.
I just found that I had a newspaper clipping in here about it was races and the Children's Advocacy Center that lost $260,000 between them for that state money. So.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, obviously, I agree with the recommendation to fund fully and give them a 2-year term. So with that, we can move on to the next one, Champaign County Christian Healthcare Center, the mental health care at CCMHB. It was for $33,000. It's 100% of the total program revenue. We have funded them before. It's not a new program. The staff recommended funding at the full request and offering a 2-year term.
This is not an increase. The request is the same as it's been for a couple of years.
I mean, from my perspective, it seems very reasonable. They've been pretty reliable. And the time I've been here, I haven't seen any issues with the agency in the terms of how they function and the services they provide. So I agree with the recommendation.
Gosh, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much. The director that they have right now has done a really great job of fundraising. They raised enough money to get a building, which is really an accomplishment. And then they applied at our request, they applied for some state funding that was proving quite hard for Champaign County agencies to get. And I couldn't understand why, because Champaign County had been identified as one of the state's priority communities. They got the funding, so yay them, but it doesn't affect this bundle of services. It's a different project, but just to say that they've been growing and not asking us for more money to do that, which is great. So
If we can backtrack, it looks like the Children's Advocacy Center got about $34,000 for flooring and counseling services from ARPA.
I guess we can just keep going through. The next one is the Champaign County Healthcare Consumers, CHW Outreach Benefit Enrollment for $91,054, 86% of the total program revenue. Staff recommended funding at $86,501, 95% of the request, and offering a 2-year term to them.
I know that's probably really weird, but that goes back to the old idea that we've tossed around of taking 5% off everything. In this case, this organization is another very effective fundraiser. And they've also been able to tap into other opportunities. The state, I think, has some CHW funding sometimes. So this recommendation, and I am not giving Leon Bryson enough credit for this. He sat through these difficult discussions with me, and he's here and he might want to chime in, but this is when we're like, well, maybe they could afford to do it for 5% less, would hope. So I don't think we did a 5% cut anywhere else, but this one we were like, oh, maybe.
And that being said, it looks like it's still higher than the funding they got last year. So it is an increase, just less than they would want. Yeah. And then I guess also that being said, we're still funding their disability services because that's not up for funding this year, but that's getting full funding. And it looks like the next one, we'll talk about it too, but we're also funding a little less than the requested, but much higher than the previous year. So, you know, they're not getting a cut from what their current levels are. They're just getting less of an increase. So, but again, still sharing the pain that we're trying to manage as much as we can. Any comments or questions about this one? All right. Seeing none, we'll go on to the Champaign County Healthcare Consumers Justice Involved CHW Services and Benefits, $94,892, 86% of total program revenue. Again, we're funding at recommendation is to fund 95% of the requests and also offer a 2-year term. And you know, just like Lynn said, you know, Champaign County Healthcare Consumers, you know, they have a strong track record. They function very effectively, very efficiently. I mean, I think they're a very reliable agency in the community, and they do very strong work. So I never have any. I have full confidence in funding them and knowing that they're going to do the job that they set out to do. So. Any other questions or comments? All right, we can go on to Community Services Center of Northern Champaign County Resource Connection. It's for $75,069, 26% of the total program revenue. And then staff recommended funding at last year's level of $68,609 and also offering a 2-year term. Did you want to comment on this one, Lynn, or?
There was a problem with our link to this meeting earlier. So, okay, this one, it almost might be good to have Leon join in on this one, but this organization has a new director who has really got it, like really hit the ground running and has been working pretty closely with Leon. The idea of funding at the PY23 level is just that they have a lot of other funding. She also has been successful in getting other grant money since this application was made. So it's not to punish people for being good fundraisers, but we're kind of 26% of total program revenue and much smaller of total agency revenue. They have a lot of other resources. She's doing a great job. It's not to diss, but it just looked like it might be affordable for them to continue at the current level instead of an increase, and to have a 2-year term just for stability. But I could be wrong with all of this.
Well, I mean, if they don't take the 2-year term, they can apply next year for higher funding, and then we can always address that if we have more funding next year. If there's no questions or comments, we'll go on to the next one. Crisis Nursery Beyond Blue, Champaign County, $100,000 request, 53% of the total program revenue. The staff recommendation was to fund at last year's level, which is $90,000, also offering a 2-year term. Obviously, Crisis Nursery has a long track record in Champaign County, providing a lot of services to those with families that desperately need it. I mean, I've referred families to them many times. So usually in times of crisis when people don't have support systems. So.
And again, I think we've already looked at several applications, and it is kind of disheartening to not fund them at the requested amount, because, whether it be, food services on the previous one, or the price of diapers and formula, all those things are going up. And so I recognize that, but I'm thankful we can at least still do the 90,000 and, hope for brighter days. And again, we're going to see more of that same sentiment as we go through these.
Was part of their increase for an expansion? Because I've noticed that personnel charged would be that part of it was 2 full-time family specialists to be hired. And I wasn't clear enough if it was that there's a vacancy and that they need to fill it, or that they've trying to expand.
I think there was at least one, if I remember right, that it was that they were trying to fill, that they had lost a staff member and were trying to, yeah.
All right, any other comments or questions? So with that, we'll go on to the next one, which is DSC Family Development, request of $656,174, 64% of the total program revenue. And then the recommendation was to fund with the Mental Health Board and IDD set aside, and offering a 2-year term for this. So I don't know if people missed the last meeting, but basically, we are dedicating a certain portion of our funding for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So this wouldn't be taking away from other agencies, because they're basically providing a bulk of that kind of support in the community that other agencies aren't able to provide, or aren't. There's other agencies that are providing that service. So I think that's probably our easiest decision to make here, funding this one. Go ahead.
I mean, if the other board members want to comment, I'll wait. Well, just making it even easier for you. But this morning, the DD board voted to advise the mental health board that this would be a good thing to spend your DD set aside money. 100% of the program is for DD, and it just cherry on top. It was a really good application. So.
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll go on to the Don Moyer Boys and Girls Club. So their first one is CU Change. They request $100,000, which is 85% of total program revenue. Staff recommended funding at a lower level than requested, which is $75,000. This is a decrease from previous years. They were requesting the same amount as the year before, so this would be a decrease in how much they're getting. Also, they were one of the late applications as well. So again, it's less, but it's still funding. So obviously, it's something we should definitely fund. They do good work. Obviously, they've had some transition in their leadership, and it's whenever we fund these agencies, it's not the leadership that benefits from the funding. It's the people that they serve, So it's the Don Moyer Boys and Girls Club. But these are children that are going to benefit from this funding, not the leadership. So obviously, I would love to fund them fully. This is really a tough year. Really hurts not to be able to fund them fully, but I understand the situation, and I think it's a good recommendation by the staff.
And I also feel they have a strong fundraising arm, and many of the individuals that serve on their board and support the Don Moyer Club, they realize how business is, and they realize how, when you have leadership changes, how that affects the whole kit and caboodle. So disappointing that we can't fund it all, but I think it's still, I hate to say it, we're very generous that we accepted late applications. So.
This was maybe one of the hardest recommendations for us to come up with. We feel very close to this program and have seen it, really struggling in the last few years to be everything to everyone. And now, with the changes at the club, they're still struggling with staffing. It's just that's a really hard sector to get and to retain and keep, I mean, I don't think they're seasonal. I think these are permanent, full-time, all year round staff, but it's still really hard to get people to do this kind of work, just like the crisis sector. So, I think we would like to nurture this program back up to the aspirations, but right now it continues to struggle, and the club is making lots of changes and they've moved. And so maybe things will get better. And thank you for mentioning the foundation, because they do have a really good fundraising arm. So they might be able to find other ways to bring this up. This was really hard.
All right, we can go on to the next one if people don't have any other questions or comments, which is the Don Moyer Boys and Girls Club CUNC program for $132,322, which is 20% of the total program revenue. We recommended funding at the last year's level, so not a cut, but maintaining the same level as before. So $110,000 instead of the $132,000. So, I mean, I agree with the recommendation, basically on the same reasons as stated before. So, any other questions or comments on this one? All right. The next one is Don Moyer Boys and Girls Club, Community Coalition Summer Youth Initiative, $107,000 request. It's 100% of the total program revenue. The staff recommendation was to fund at a lower amount, which is 90,000. So this would be a cut from previous years. I guess the only question is, will they be able to hire staff with the 90,000, or will they not be able to provide the service if we fund them at less?
Well, we thought, at least I thought, this one might be they might be able to do this because it's all subcontracts with other programs, and they're, often very small organizations that wouldn't normally be able to meet the mental health board requirements. So they're subcontracting and they're only serving people for a 2-week period. So it's a series of very small subcontracts. It's usually 16, and it just seemed like, okay, maybe they can cut out a few of those. The schools are also talking about, ramping up their summer programming. I'm not sure if you just never know how that's really going to work out. But this is a pretty innovative set of programs. So we didn't want to say no to it, because it is reaching some kids who don't use the school programs. So, and quite creatively. So we just, hopeful that they could do it without that 17,000. So.
At the last community coalition, there was somebody from the Freedom School in Urbana, the new program, who talked about the things they're going to do for, I think, 50 middle and high school and high school students. And it does sound like that might take the pressure off some other programs that serve that same age group. So they sounded very enthusiastic and organized, but who knows?
Well, maybe we should go lower.
No, freedom schools around the country have done quite a bit of work in that direction. And so it's something that I think when more services out there and more interagency collaboration really will probably hopefully take some of the pressure off.
All right. With that, we'll move on to the next one, which is Don Moyer Boys and Girls Club Youth and Family Services. The request is for $160,000. It's 100% of total program revenue. And the staff recommended funding at a lower amount than requested, which is $140,000. Also less than the previous year as well. So this would be a cut to their normal program.
Did they utilize all their funding in the previous year?
This one, I think, has always utilized other funding, and they also have had other funding until this year, but they have some vacancies right now. So we thought, okay, and they're in a transition restructuring, so they might be able to afford to do this for a little bit less, but that might be the wrong call. This is, again, like, I didn't talk to them, and I'm not sure that if I asked anyone, hey, could you do this, that they'd say, sure. But this was based on vacancies.
And I would go back to the interagency collaboration, that some of its services are provided by some of the other agencies that we support. So hopefully there is much more conversation about interagency work, as opposed to just saying, let's do it ourselves. Let's see who else can provide those services.
All right, with that, we can move on to the next one, which is the East Central Illinois Refugee Mutual Assistance, Family Supporting and Strengthening, which is a request for $71,300, which is only 6% of the total program revenue. And staff recommended funding at last year's level, which is $62,000, but offering a 2-year term as well.
Because it looks like they have a lot of money,
Hmm.
a lot of other money.
A
And
good
that's-
problem to have.
And that's the question, that's the audit question. It
Yeah.
looks like they ended the year with quite a surplus.
So do we know when we'll get what the timeline is on getting responses about questions from the audit?
So they, immediately after I asked the question, they gave a preliminary answer. And then I wanted some more information. And so we're sort of stuck in that, like, what kind of information would actually be helpful? But what it looks like is that the audit includes payments that the state made that were owed to them the year before. So if that's what it is, then we're good. But they were working on how to prove that. So, I mean, I don't need a ton of proof. Just if that's what happened, then put it in writing and I'm happy. So that's where we got. And I think that we would like to settle that before entering into a contract. So the recommendation is, so the difference between deferring until we have settled those things and then bringing a decision back to you is that here you're saying, if they settle it with me, then you're okay with us going forward with a contract. In the other cases, they settle it with me and I bring you information and then you make a decision on funding. So it's pretty different. Okay.
Well, I mean, this one's different because they have the audit and we just have questions about the audit. The other ones don't have the audit.
They've already started.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? All right, moving on, we'll go on to Family Services of Champaign County for counseling, a request of $30,000, which is about 40% of total program revenue. And staff recommended funding at the requested level and offering a 2-year term. So basically no increase from the previous year of what they requested. So it's the same. Oh, do we have someone from Family Services of Champaign that would like to make any comments or if anyone has any questions? Hmm. Oh, sorry. I know, right? So I guess please, wait, do we have to just please state your name and agency?
Did I just shut it off? No, I turned it on. Joan Dixon, I'm Executive Director of Family Service. Our counseling program is a program we've had forever.
We are actively trying to increase the number of clients we have. We're also adding, we hope by the end of the summer, 3 new counselors. We take Medicare, Medicaid, we have a sliding fee scale. And I mean, if you walked in today, you could have an appointment. And so we're trying to maybe rebrand or better brand our counseling services so people understand, and so we can address those folks who may not have insurance or the ability to pay directly. So your help is very critical to us, and we certainly appreciate it. We also, as it notes there, we do a lot of work through drug court and the clients of drug court who come to us for assessments and then for counseling as well.
Thank you so much.
So, and I don't mean to start a big dust up or anything, but if drug court were to receive state funding, it would be amazing to put some of that funding toward the services that the mental health board has paid for 20 years. So I think that we should, I feel strongly about this recommendation that we should continue with this level, but also if there is an opportunity for more funding from the state, that would be amazing. And I will be there to write a letter of support or come to a county board meeting or whatever you need.
And if I could only add, we received $2,500 from the county for our work with drug court, and that amount has not changed in 20 years.
Yeah, I'm just speechless on that one. So, all right. Well, with that, we can go on to Family Service of Champaign County's disability benefits for the family. This is a new request for $72,619, which is 100% of total program revenue. The staff recommendation was to not fund due to affordability this year, but it was an excellent application and definitely would recommend submitting for a proposal next year. Again, I think this year is just I just want to say it sucks, but it's not, it's a very tough, it's a tough year. Yeah, it sucks. Because I would really like to afford this program. Yeah, it's a really good program. I agree. Any comments or questions?
Would there be any collaboration with Champaign County? What's it called? Yes, thank you. I mean, because I think they might provide some aspects of the same thing and directing them to them because they're almost fully funded. So, yeah.
On to that?
Go ahead, please.
We'd be happy to. From my previous life, I'm pretty familiar with the healthcare consumers, and I similarly think they do excellent work. And we can certainly talk with them about it. This is a program, when they developed it in the office, we've all fallen in love with it. We think it's a great program. So any way we can get it underway, which may be working collaboratively with healthcare consumers, we'll pursue that.
Because the need is very great in this community. So having 2 agencies do it would be ideal, but, and I keep asking about, like fundraising arms and stuff like that. Do you guys do many fundraisers through your agency?
We don't do any fundraising events. Events are so expensive to do and the return on them is very low. Again, if I can take just a minute, in my previous role as CEO of the Community Foundation, we did a survey of the different fundraisers that are done. And one large organization raised $500,000 in events for the year, and they netted $50,000. Now, at that point you say you're raising friends as well, right? You're getting more people familiar with it, but it's so labor intensive. And as we all know, we need people to provide services, not to provide tchotchkes and baskets. So we've taken the approach that we pursue grants outside of state and federal grants, and we have a number of folks who leave money to us in their estate plan. So we would like to do more, and I think when I'm replaced, since I'm hopefully only interim in this position, we'll get somebody who really has a good focus on fundraising in different ways.
No, I appreciate that. I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head, and I'm like, let me ask.
Yeah.
Were there any other questions or comments? I think Glenn, you can have a comment or a question.
And it was also hard to say to recommend denial for this one because we also really loved it. And I think it did something that we are funding a lot of benefits acquisition, and that's super important because it gets people off of locally funded programs and into state and federally funded programs. That's great. But it hit something that no one else has really talked a lot about, and that is what happens to families during that process. The process is cruel. It's humiliating. People drop out because of that and just take care of it themselves and go without insurance or whatever other benefits they might be eligible for. So I thought, like, first, yeah, I like the taking responsibility for healing that trauma, but also that could keep people in the game until they do get benefits. So it's kind of two things, the ultimate goal, but also like, it's a horrible process, isn't it? And just so many people just stop before they are successful because it's too much. So it was a lovely insight. Thank you for putting that on the table.
All right, with that, we can move on to Family Service of Champaign County Self-Help Center. It was for $28,932, about 92% of the total program revenue. And staff recommended funding at previous levels of $28,430 for PY24, and then the full amount for PY25, because 25 was a conference year and 24 is not. So basically, this is a 2-year contract. Sorry, just to be clear about that. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. I mean, again, this is one we've funded for a long time. Yeah, and at those levels for a very long time. I think it's a very reasonable request. And I don't have any comments or questions. So anyone else? All right, we can go on to the Senior Counseling and Advocacy. It's $178,386 for 32% of the total program revenue. And there was a recommendation to fund as requested and offering a 2-year term.
This is a small increase over previous years, but it's incorporating that new piece to some extent, that the creativity, which is pretty cool. So, yeah.
Any questions? All right, we can move on to Immigrant Services of CU, Immigrant Mental Health Program. This is a new program. The request was for $119,705, which is 77% of total program revenue. The staff recommendation was to fund at adjusted amount of $90,000, with the hopes that hopefully that would be they would be able to still function with that. Obviously, this is a new program. If we fund it, it's going to affect people in the population that are usually don't have a voice and are very underserved, and help people get asylum that are seeking it. for the forensic evaluation that they need. Obviously, I think if they're able to get training for the person to be to do low bono evaluations, that would definitely be able to, that would make it so that those in the county that can get the evaluation or afford that low bono rate to be able to get more asylum seeking approval or asylum cases approved. So I would love to fund this. Obviously, this is a tough year. I am open to hearing what other people have to say. I know with our initial discussion, part of me was not wanting to fund new programs this year due to affordability. Obviously, you know, I think the idea of sharing the pain is a good idea. So then we are able to afford some things that, you know, I think would be worth, I mean, all of them are worth the funding, but ones where people are really, really in desperate straits to get help. But I'm open to hearing what other people have in regards to comments and questions.
I think it is important to fund this to the extent that we're able, with the expiration of Article 42. Is that what we're, you know, we're not going to see less immigrant neighbors needing our help. So that's just something for us to keep in mind as we see these requests.
That thought came to mind for me too. And this is a community that is particularly under attack, I think, in many ways in our country. And being able to provide these services to some extent that we're able to, I think, would be important.
I know of a local case in which a person from Guatemala who was married to an American citizen was deported under the previous administration anyway, under a technicality, back to the town where she had watched her father and brother be murdered, and she was back in that town. And it wasn't any less dangerous, and she was known. And so she was lucky in that her husband's family could afford lawyers to fight her deportation, but it took 2 years of legal work where she had to basically stay in hiding in her own country. So, and then she finally got to come back. But, you know, we've kind of, sometimes you read about the immigrant problem in the newspaper, but don't know the individual stories, and, you know, just horrifying. That's just one I know of.
I mean, obviously, the other thing, I mean, as a pediatrician, I see families where they have several kids and they've been here for several years and trying to get the process of getting their asylum approved or getting, you know, their entrance into the country approved. And one of the parents end up getting deported, and then you have a parent raising, you know, 2-3 children without their partner, and their partner's in another country, and then their kids can't see them, and so, you know, that parent is working, and they're basically a single parent at that point, raising, you know, several children, and the difficulty in that, but also seeing the difficulty in the children growing up without that parent in their life at that point. And then you basically leave the partner with the partner that got deported with the option of trying to sneak back here or trying to go through the system, and knowing that the system's going to take forever if you ever get through, you know, years, if not a decade or two. In the meantime, you're missing your children's future. So very tough situations for a lot of families, not to mention just people that come here by themselves. So we, you know, Cunningham Children's Home sees children from the border, and we see them at the hospital for an evaluation, for vaccinations, make sure they don't need to see specialists before they go on to the next step in their process. So a lot of those kids that are teenagers walked here, you know, and they sustained all kinds of trauma, mental and physical, on their way here. And you know, I cannot imagine the thought of not struggling and coming all the way here, and then the thought of having to go back. And I have family in Central America and Honduras, and knowing how dangerous some of those places are in terms of kidnappings and gang violence, it's like being kidnapped and held for ransom in Honduras is not an uncommon business. And one of my cousins got kidnapped in Honduras, or her husband got kidnapped years ago. And so that's something, and you know, that's someone who has resources to get their family member out. Other people have to go through the threat of violence on a daily basis. So with that, you know, these people come from areas that they would not come here and suffer unless they had no other option to come on the journey to come here. So anyways, sorry, long story, but.
I was going to add more, but I will leave it alone.
The next one is Mahomet Area Youth Club, the BLAST program, which is $12,000, 86% of the program. And, you know, the staff, initially we wrote fund as requested and offering a 2-year term, but I think I would hold off and not fund this program this year.
Would you prefer, so I mean, you all can do whatever you want next week with our staff recommendations, but our hope is to make that meeting more smooth for you by having this meeting. So we could create a motion that is to deny this funding instead of to defer until the questions are answered. I mean, you could always just make the motion that you believe in next week, regardless of what we say.
Are you saying make the motion tonight? Oh, okay.
Whatever we put into the staff memo is not what you have to do. So if we put defer and you instead would like to just straightforwardly deny funding, you could change the motion to be that. So I'm just asking if there is a sort of agreement to do one or the other right now, I would change the memo. But if you want to wait next week, you decide that that's okay. I mean, you all have to make the decisions. We just have to give you our opinions.
I mean, even with the audit, I think I think there's enough evidence there that I think we don't need to fund them this year. And I would wait until next year and see if their application, if there's any difference, you know, and do we have the funding for it? Do they have the need? Is there a need for the funding at that point? So I think this year, I don't think there's a good amount of need at this point to fund this.
Can I ask for elaboration on like the way in which we know that, given that they have not responded to your questions?
The agencies send us minutes from their board meetings, and in a recent board meeting, they acknowledged that they had some unfinished business with us. So that's pretty current. And then also they had talked about having $7 million on hand. So, you know, I think that's to serve everybody. This contract allows them to serve children who can't pay any fees at all. So it has a function, but they could potentially fund those children with the money that they have. And they have experienced some, you know, better fundraising and an increased increased involvement from the school district financially. So, they could go a year without this funding.
These are relatively small amounts that they're asking for. The shadow of $7 million pretty much eclipses that, I think.
I think initially I was leaning more toward deferring until we actually get a concrete answer from them directly. But since we received their minutes directly, that does give us pretty specific information.
And just in case I'm not remembering it right, I can triple check that before I do anything else. Okay.
And I guess you could rock the boat a little bit and be like, I noticed something in your minutes. Is that a typo? And if they're like, no, that's accurate, be like, thanks, bye-bye. I mean, because I doubt that's a typo, but I guess I'd be giving them the option to be like, yes, that was a typo, or yeah, no, that's correct. Because even if it's for building a new building, you got to take care of your other stuff first.
All right, the next one is the Mahama Area Youth Club Macy Members Matter for $27,400 or 16% of the total program revenue. The recommendation was to fund as requested and offering a 2-year term. But again, I think in light of recent information, and given the situation and allocation of fundings this year, I would deny the application for funding at this time. Anyone else? Did you have a comment?
Mostly just a question. So if we do decide to deny both of these, which sounds like we're going to, so that's what, almost $40,000. Are we, from your recommendations, any ideas on what you can do with 40,000?
I had already put that. That's the scenario that I want to share with you next week that has 28,000 left to play with. So it's already. But y'all are like, gosh, I just wish that I could meet with Tammy Ogden in September tomorrow instead of in September, because it's been true for 7 years that we have more money. This is hard. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Yeah, so just to confirm then, so this wouldn't affect any of our other recommendations. Okay.
Just out of curiosity, if we end up getting more funding and we are finished with funding agencies, what happens with that extra money? Do we say, hey, agencies, do you have the capacity to take some of that extra money left over that we didn't account for?
Can I just say, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
So some of those agencies we didn't fully fund, right? And so if we don't fully fund them and say they don't have the staff, that's fine. They can't take the funding that they wanted fully for. But some of those other agencies say they could take the full funding if we do have some extra money left over, because we have to use everything the whole year, right? You can't have anything unspent because it's okay. So that's what I'm saying. Like we have to give it back, right? So instead of giving it back, could we then fully fund some of those agencies, I guess, retroactively?
Yeah, it's
Or the ones that we funded 90%, we're going to go ahead and fund you 100% now.
So, yeah, but what I've been doing is budgeting for returned revenue every year. So it's already part of the formula. And I've just learned in the last couple of years that maybe I should not budget for so much returned revenue because it's quite a bit harder than I thought it would be. But I just noticed, I'm so glad that you all asked me to check the minutes. I did read it wrong. It wasn't 7 million, it was 71 million. So now I really do wonder if that's a typo, and hopefully we will make some contact with them and see what is going on. Why do you mess with us at all? Yeah. I mean, that's like really feel quite justified in asking if that's a typo. Or if the M is a mistake.
What was an M? I didn't see.
It was 71M. So it could be $71.
So I know that sometimes, you know, with some of our agencies, you don't get an immediate response back quickly, but hopefully like tomorrow, this can be like one of your priorities to say, hey, I need a clarification like in the next 48 hours.
Hello, but I have to stay up late writing your memo for May 24th to make the board packets tomorrow. So this is a thing that we might just have to provide you information at the meeting.
No, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it needs to be urgently. I need my answer. You know, it affects your funding. Thank you. I'm sassy tonight. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, that seems like that question was already asked in the May or the April meetings about directly to them and they haven't answered.
Oh, yeah. Please. We can help them. They used to be part of it, Don Moyer for us.
All right, with that, we'll go on to promise mental health services for $352,035, which is 19.8% of the total program revenue. Staff recommended funding at an adjusted amount of $330,000, just so that we can kind of share the pain a little bit. You know, obviously this is a little bit of a cut from previous year, but I think promise can definitely handle that, taking 20,000 less. I'm definitely fine with this recommendation.
So this was absolutely about sharing the pain, but just to their credit, Promise is doing a really great job these days. The application is good. Their reporting is really good. They work with Leon Bryson quite a bit on all sorts of stuff. They did ask, what's the rationale behind this cut? So, you know, I've gave my initial explanation and waiting to hear if they have more specific concerns about that. It really is about affordability. And this is an organization with, you know, which should be eligible for a lot of other funding, especially federal funding. And this particular, we'll talk about wellness in a second, but this one is for services which are often billable to other insurers. So I thought this one is a little bit safer to go down. So we'll probably continue that dialogue. I appreciated them reaching out to me, and it's just a new day with that organization. Just things are going good. So.
Hey, Lynn, this is Jamie Dahlman with Promise Health. And we just wanted to thank you for your ongoing consideration with our program and let you know that we will absorb the cut in funding and continue to serve our communities.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we'll go on to Promises Healthcare's wellness program. It's for $107,078 for 30% of the total program revenue. The recommendation by staff was to fund at a requested level and offer a 2-year contract at that. And so this was not an increase. No, it's a decrease. It's a decrease of $900, well, more than $900, $909. Again, everything you said, you know, Promise Healthcare has just amazed me on how well they have done in just responding to us and their applications, and just I cannot praise them for how well they have corrected the ship. So yeah. So I agree with funding them and offering the 2-year term. So all right. Now the heartbreaking one, which is races. I mean, I'm glad we're able to fund them, but just sad that they even have to come to us for funding. But shouldn't happen, but here we are, and luckily, I think we have funding to fund them this year, which is their sexual trauma therapy services, which is $149,284, 30% of the total program revenue. The recommendation was to fund at a lower level than requested of $140,000 and offer a 2-year term. Did you have questions or comments, Lynn?
People might want to talk about this one. I don't mean to jump in too fast, but just to let you know, like, the organization told you, and they put it in the application, that they were going to apply for other funding, particularly from United Way, to try to make up this gap. They did. A whole bunch of organizations in your current portfolio also have applied for United Way funding. The United Way will make its decisions the day after you make yours. So we can't really count on, between the United Way and the Mental Health Board to make them whole. But I recommend, with a relatively high degree of confidence, that doing partial funding of 140,000 through this one and 75,000 for the other one, it will be safe. I can't be totally sure, but we've been talking a lot, and I mean, you all could do something totally different on the 24th, and then United Way could do something totally different on the 25th. But I think the organization did such a great job of explaining this situation to all funders and pursuing. And anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. So.
And it does look like the amount that's been recommended for funding would fully encompass the personnel costs that they have. There are, it looks like, some additional expenses that maybe wouldn't fully be encompassed by the recommendation, but the personnel would be.
All right, with that, I guess we'll go on to the RACE's sexual violence prevention education, which is, again, same thing like what Lynn just said. It's $82,996, which is 30% of the program revenue. And the recommendation was to fund at a level lower than requested, which is 75,000, and also offer a 2-year term as well. Which, I mean, I agree. I think we should do both. All right. Any other comments or questions?
Same situation with personnel for that one being fully encompassed by the recommended funding amount.
With that, we'll go on to Rosecrans. So their benefits case management, which is $80,595, 14% of total program revenue. And the recommendation is to fund as requested. This is not an increase from previous years. So they've been holding pretty steady, very reliable organization. I think I agree with the staff recommendation. No comments. We'll go on to Rosecrans Child and Family Services request for $83,500, which is 72% of total program revenue. And the recommendation is to fund as requested as well. All right. Any comments, questions? All right. Seeing none, we'll go on to Rosecrans's Criminal Justice PSC. The request was for $330,000, 69% of total program revenue. And then the recommendation was to fund at last year's level, which is $320,000. The next one is Rosecrans Crisis Co-Response Team, CCRT, for $207,946, which is 43% of total program revenue. And the recommendation by staff was also to fully fund this one as well.
Just also to note that for all of these, the recommendation is equal to the PY 23 level, because they asked for increases in only 2. Well, I mean, Child and Family Services is a little special because your current funding was just for 9 months, so, but technically no increase. Anyway.
Thanks for that clarification. With that, we can go on to the recovery home, which is $100,000, 24% of program revenue. And again, 100%, or the recommendation was to fund at the requested level. Again, there was no increase from last year. I feel like everybody is on the same page on this, so we can keep going through. Rosecrans Specialty Courts, $178,000, which is 99.6% of total program revenue. And the recommendation is to fund at last year's level, which is $169,464. So just just a little bit less, so 8,000 less. So
and the recommendation includes us complaining about wanting some state funding for it too. We'll just keep complaining because maybe it'll change. And you're in the middle of all that. Sorry. Okay.
all right. With that, we go on to Terrapin Station Sober Living Recovery Home, which is $79,677, 82% of total program revenue. And the recommendation is also to fund as requested. This is an increase from previous year of $61,000. So there's an increase of about $18,000 on this one. Was there, can you elaborate on why, if there was a reason why we didn't share the pain on this one?
Yeah, we started to, but this is relatively small amount of money, and everything we put in the program summary as a critique or a potential problem, the agency actually addressed it. Then got back to us. So there was a question about I wasn't sure why they're paying property taxes because it's a nonprofit. So they said, well, we were denied before, but we'll go back to the assessor's office and try it again. So I felt like we're getting really a kind of amazing follow through from this one person agency. I think that he has cultivated a very strong board, and the board members are helping him with some of this stuff. So I just thought, and again, we could, I would take 2,000 out of it because of that property tax amount, but I just felt like we're getting a really good value out of this organization and let them grow a little bit. But it is, yes, we could spread the pain a little if you wanted to. It's just.
Well, I really like to see, and we know which ones they are, the agencies that we see start, like we function as kind of an incubator function. And then some of them start and then they just stay there, and then, but the ones that keep thinking and keep refining their model, I think need rewarding for that. I do, because they're taking it serious, because they have a mission that's in a way different from the ones that just, okay, now we're going to do this for perpetuity, just the way we've always done it. That's good. It fulfills some gap in services, but the ones that keep on, I'm the ones that really interest me, and being sure we support their efforts to continue to get better.
I'm gonna just keep picking on the county board. They have opioid settlement money and have, several discussions already about what to do with it. This is one organization that's doing some harm reduction that isn't done anywhere else in this community. And so if there's, harm reduction is kind of the focus of the opioid settlement money recommendation. I think it's abatement is the title, but the harm reduction strategies are heavily recommended for county plans, but the county does get to decide what it does with the money. And this organization might be too small to go after any of that settlement money, but I think like it could be a model for others if that money is open, if there's an open grant opportunity. I'm not sure that's what's happening, but.
I only spoke to Emily Rodriguez very, very briefly about that. She's kind of spearheading that for us. But I will ask and get back to you.
All right, next one is the Up Centers, Champaign County's Children and Youth and Family Program for $190,056, which is 58% of total program revenue. The recommendation was to fund at an adjusted level of 150,000. And then we changed, and then you change your mind, and then we're gonna fund fully at $190,056. I mean, I agree with that, especially with all the stuff on a national stage, statewide. I mean, on a state level, I think obviously we're better off than many other states from an LGBTQ perspective on their rights. But I think, others have made a great point that we might be getting more of an influx into states that provide rights to that vulnerable population, and there may be an increase in need for services for those individuals. So I think this is going to be a time that we should be definitely funding them as much as we can, because they are going to likely have an increase in need.
I work with a lot of LGBTQ individuals and especially youth in my therapy practice. And even though a lot of my clients recognize like the safety that being in this state provides, they're still very distraught at what is happening around the country, and especially being surrounded by a number of states that are completely eradicating gender affirming care. I'm also aware of a number of individuals who have already like moved to Champaign, Urbana from other states, both nearby states and states that are quite far away, specifically because of our resources. And if the Up Center was already at capacity, it's gonna just get even more so. So I definitely recommend the full amount that they've requested.
Yeah, being a pediatrician, most of the time we used to refer to Chicago for children for gender affirming care. Luckily, for adults, when children turn 18, there are a few areas in town that we can send them to. And it's just interesting to see that this county has those resources when neighboring counties do not. There's people at Carl, there's people at Christie Clinic, there's Planned Parenthood that we send 18 and up to for gender affirming care. There's just family doctors, there's endocrinologists here for 18 and up. And having the Up Center here and having the resource for people for group therapy and knowing that they're not alone, and for parents who are supportive or who don't understand, and are on that path, for them to be able to go and to a place like this and talk to other families, talk to other individuals going through that, and knowing what it's like, and knowing that this is, this is normal. This is part of the human spectrum, and and that they're not alone. And those in the LGBTQ community who do not have support go through are more likely to suffer more severe depression, more severe anxiety, higher suicidal risk, the risk of harming themselves, And so I am just very grateful that we have that support in this community. So with that, we can go on to the Well Experiences Well Family Care Program. This was for $256,656, which is 51% of the total program revenue. And then it said when adjusted by error and expense form, the total request is $220,656. And the recommendation was to defer a decision until approved PY22 audit is submitted and reviewed and any issues resolved, and in the event of increased revenue projection for PY24.
I just have a logistical question about that. If we're referring until the audit, are we kind of holding that money to the side? No.
So that's what I was trying to getting to earlier at the
Yeah.
very beginning of this, is if we approve the funding for all these other ones, we won't have funding for these deferrals. So they won't get funding. So that may make our decisions a little more difficult on if we want to spread the pain more and be able to fund these programs, hold the money to hopefully fund these programs, or do we say no to some of these programs, or do we say no to some of the previous programs? So those are questions I do want to discuss today.
Okay, so I guess one of my questions, and I'm sorry if it was answered in another email or something, have we gotten any updates on the current audit?
Thank you. For the next three, they're just conveniently right in a row. They're really all in the same boat. Like the audits have been delayed partly because of difficulty finding a CPA firm in the first place. So that was a requirement of the contract and didn't happen right away. And then there are additional problems with completing the audit, in some cases because of the bookkeeping at the agency. So that's a deeper level problem. So Leon Bryson and Stephanie Howard Gallo got together last week to say, like, what do we do? How do we find out what's going on? And Stephanie sent an email to everyone about the motion that you all made back in March, about maybe 5 audits that we were waiting for then. And what do we do if we get to June 1st and we don't have them and the contracts are automatically canceled then? And your condition on waiting till, no, it was like April 1st. You gave them till June 1st on the condition that they would email us once a month with updates. So after Stephanie sent that email out, she and Leon got lots of information from all 3 of these organizations. We know exactly where they're at with their audits now. 2 of them, Urbana Neighborhood Connections and Women in Need Recovery, actually sent audits, and we sent them back and said, these are missing all the supplementary information that's required. So this, like, we do ask for some extra things, and a lot of times, first time through, people don't notice that. So technically they've submitted audits, but they're not complete. So I think we do not need to cancel those 2 contracts, but we don't have all the information we need to confidently recommend to you that they are in good financial standing. But the Well Experience situation is different. They're still working on it. They are doing so much cleanup. And I think that it was very smart of them to engage with the firm they engaged, because they're getting they're going to be in a great position after this audit, even without the funding, like just as far as going forward. But that audit might take longer than the other 2, because the other 2 thought they were done already. So I think it is a great question. Like, if we don't hold this money back and we're just deferring until later, we're likely, if we have extra money through a change in the projection, it's likely to be $60,000 more, plus the 25 or 28 that's tucked away here. So you could do well, Urbana Neighborhood Connections is a very small contract, but you could do one or the other of the other two. So it's really tough. So I appreciate your point. Anyway, that's the whole update on the audits.
Okay, so I'm gonna probably put my foot in my mouth here, but I think that happens a lot in this room. I've seen county board meetings. So I guess one of my concerns is, and I've voiced this over my time here on this board, when you make an exception for one, others are gonna wanna have that exception too. So at first I was like, oh, Urbana neighborhood, it's only $25,500. But why should I say yes because it's 25,500 and say absolutely not to the well experience? Because they're all in the same boat pretty much. Yes, two have somewhat submitted, but we've been after this audit thing for a very long time, it feels like. And I know it's not completely their fault. Maybe they could ask their accountant, would you like to make a very nice tax deductible donation because we just lost $25,500 or whatever. So again, I may come across as a heartless person. I'm not, but I'm worried about if we say, okay, let's bend the rules here because the amount or because of all the great services they do. I think it opens up a problem. And we've seen that several months ago when I said, oh, it's okay, their audit's late, still give them the money. And here we are still waiting for money. So that was my unpopular opinion that has been on video, and I'm sure I'll make front page news tomorrow. Thank you very much, Jane Sprandel.
You can see another maybe important difference between the three agencies in the other details that Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center is a very well-established program and has a ton of other funding. We are only 15% of their total program revenue and even less of their total agency revenue. They might not really need us. I don't know. We have not talked to them like that, but it's just maybe our requirements. I kind of want to say, are our requirements just worth all the hassle for with all the other money that you have? We could approach it that way, but it's different for the other two. Women in Need Recovery and the Well Experience are growing fast. They have been able to secure lots of other funding, significantly state funding. I'm happy that the state recognizes these pretty different needs too, but they are both relying on us for more proportionally. So that doesn't really help.
And it does look like the Well Experience and Wind Recovery did request more than previously. And with the Well Experience, their PY23 funding is 100,000. So it's quite a difference. So if we're looking at a situation of having to share the pain with, holding at PY23 levels for other programs, if in deferral in the future, we might be looking at making a decision of not the exact amount they requested, but potentially more like PY23 levels, which is, a different ball game that I wanted to point out.
So I guess we can just go through the rest of them and then we can talk about the whole thing. But I guess the one thing I don't want to say is if we do what we're saying right now, we would have about 20-some thousand left over. And then with the increase in the taxes, we would get another 60. So we'd have 80-some thousand. Again, like you said, just be able to fund one. And I guess just my opinion, it would probably be, from my opinion, be either the Well Experience or the Wind Recovery. I'd probably favor the Wind Recovery just because that's such a high need from my perspective. And I think I would want to have a program like that in the community that we don't otherwise have for women. So or at least be able to fund them so that they can do as much as they can. But if we want to take money like 10,000 here from one of the funding requests, we could and increase that amount so that we can more fully fund one of these other agencies if the money comes in. But I'm fine with what other people think. So
When we were looking at the Rosecrans ones, there were a couple, I think that they had asked for a little bit extra funding, but most of them were pretty flat on the requests. Again, I don't necessarily want to take money away from all the great things Rosecrans is doing in our community, but again, I don't want to rework all the math here because that is not my strong suit. But could we take a little bit of theirs to share the pain? It's just an idea.
I mean, it's hard to guess how that would go, but maybe because recovery home is a flat 100,000, that sort of stands out to me as maybe one to take 10,000 out of. I don't feel so weird saying that, but
well, and it is hard to take money from an agency that didn't do anything wrong. They're crossing their T's, dotting their I's, but we're like, well, because you're doing so great. And have that fundraising arm a little bit. I mean, that's why I feel a little bit more like, okay, maybe if we did take $10,000 from them, it's not going to sink the ship. It's just going to make it like, okay, let's get creative.
Or like 5,000 from the criminal justice PSC and then 5,000 from the recovery home. And that would give us 10 more thousand. So this way we'd have 30,000 left over, plus hopefully another 60. And then this way we more fully fund one of the remaining ones that if we wanted to fully fund one. Yeah. So instead of 320,000 be 315, instead of 100,000 be 95,000. So they're not hit as hard.
I think I would want to see how much of those like reductions would impact personnel costs, which I am going to look at right now.
while you're doing that, we did get a response. So Leon emailed the director of Macy, and that is quite a typo. It was, I mean, I think you win. It was 71,000. So not 71 million. So I don't know if that's a game changer to y'all. It's not necessarily to me, but because I have seen the audit and there did appear to be quite a bit of surplus revenue last year. Not enough to cover our services, but that's why the board minutes really got my attention. Like, oh, so I'm glad that we checked.
So I guess it was a K. Again, that being said, I still would deny the funding just because there is such a need in other areas in the community right now and the other programs. So do we want to go through the other last two, I guess, agencies real quick? So Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center, Community Study Center, again, $25,000, 15% of total program revenue. The recommendation was to defer decision until approval of the audit. And then for the wind recovery, it's community support and reentry houses for $123,194 or $98 for 44% of the program revenue. And the recommendation was to defer a decision until the approved PY22 audit. And then, yeah. All right. Is there any other discussion?
Well, there's more.
I just wanted to add the thing I was looking up, that it looked like if there was a reduction for the criminal justice PSC and recovery home from Rosecrans, that would not impact the personnel specific request for either one. I guess another question, for wind recovery, my understanding was their reason for the audit delay was different than the other ones, because was that the organization where the auditor messed up and didn't, didn't realize they were supposed to do it and they had to like find another, or am I incorrect?
That
on
was Grow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My apologies.
And we are still waiting for Grow. They also sent lots of updates, but they have a 2-year contract. So you're not discussing their situation here, but they are really pushing for that audit. So, I mean, I feel like everybody's, really invested in it now. I'm sorry that it got to this point.
I think I have asked you that before and made the same mistake. It's probably because they both are acronym organizations. My apologies.
All right. Oh, I guess the ones that you told me to cover, the DSC, those are the ones I'm forgetting, and PACES.
Yeah, there's other stuff.
All right.
Some of it's.
So I guess the next thing is DSC individual and family support, which is 250,000, which is 99.5% of total program revenue. The recommendation was to fund through the IDD special initiatives for that. And then PACES, same thing as well for the consumer control and personal support for 36,000, which is 94% of total program revenue. And the recommendation was to fund through the IDD special initiatives, which I agree with.
So those are 100% DD, and the Developmental Disabilities Board met this morning and they did vote to fund both of those through the DD Special Initiatives Fund pending Mental Health Board approval. So, but sadly, we have to go back up into the memo. No, you didn't miss it. We've got to the important stuff, but here comes the not important stuff in case you want to go over it. It is important. There's a doomsday clause, and I mean, it has happened before. So here we are, the contract negotiations. So there's the memo will have a motion asking you to authorize me to conduct contract negotiations with the agencies, but we have tried, Kim Bowdry, Leon Bryson, Chandra Somerville, Stephanie Howard Gallen, Chris Wilson, and I have been very careful to put as much information as possible into the decision memo so that you know what we're going to be negotiating about. Like we kind of don't want to take, total control of that process, or at least you should be informed. But so there'll be a motion to allow me to engage in those negotiations, but I want you to have as much information as possible beforehand. So that's the first one. And then this is the doomsday clause. And it has happened before. It happened in 2009 or 10 when enough banks failed that the economy actually did shrink. So that could affect the estimated tax revenues for next year, but maybe more likely to affect the revenues for 2025. But it's, there's a chance that we could come in lower than what we're budgeting for right now. So it's a hideous idea, but we would have to go in and come up with some scenario for cutting more. So this clause is always in there. You can. I don't think we would do any cuts without bringing the set of decisions to you all. So the clause is probably not totally necessary, but it's kind of like putting it into the contract, lets the agencies understand too that this is really soft money. We've been very lucky for 7 or 8 years, but the luck could run out. And then there's a provision that I want to take out that had to do with realigning funds related to the pandemic. There's already language that allows for realignment of funds. So this is a little bit redundant and we really haven't used that clause. But then there's one that you added last year because when we went through the funding guidelines again, the attorney said, make sure that the contract can supersede the funding guidelines, especially if the amounts that you're saying an agency can use for audits are obsolete because the CPAs just keep raising their prices. So that's the example that we would actually even put into the contracts, just so that agencies know that they can ask for more money for something like that, or ask for other exceptions to the funding guidelines rules, because some of those rules may be barriers that don't need to be there, but that would be a special exception through the contract. So those are the other motions that'll be in there. I'm sorry. If there's any questions about.
Does any board members have any questions? All right, seeing none, I'll move on. I guess before we finish and move on to the next thing, is everyone okay with what we just discussed for the last 2 hours on funding? Because we're going to be discussing this, I guess, next week. So does this plan look okay to everybody? Speak now or forever hold your peace until next week. All right. So with that, we'll move on to agency input. If there's any agencies that would like to make any comments, now's the time.
Hello again, Joan Dixon. With a different hat on, I happen to serve on the board of Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center. And you all know that funding for a nonprofit is like a mosaic, and each piece of that is critical. To say maybe Urbana Neighborhood Connections doesn't need the money, of course they do. We, Lynn and Leon particularly know the struggles we have had trying to get the audits done. Weekly calls and daily calls to the auditor have been a struggle. Over the past several years, couple years now that Janice Mitchell died, we have, as a board, tried to help bring up the level of professionalism in the area of accounting and fund tracking. We now have CLA's BizOps working for us, doing all our financial management. And so we have great confidence as a board that our financial conditions are transparent, explainable, easy for us to get information from to provide to the mental health board, for instance, and to the auditor. Our sticking point still continues to be the auditor. We have every confidence that they'll be able to get the questions that are outstanding. We thought we had everything, obviously, but we can get those questions answered. And then going forward, I think we're going to have to look for a different auditor. The one we have is in Springfield because that's the one we can afford. We can't pay $15,000 for an audit. It's a struggle for us to pay the $11,000 that we have to pay for this audit. That is not an audit that we're in love with, shall we say, but it's an audit. We think it fairly represents the financial conditions. It's just, we want to move things along more quickly. So that being said, thank you. And we certainly appreciate everything you do for the community.
Thank you. With that, I'll move to board announcements. Is there any board announcements? Seeing none, I will move to adjourn. See you guys next week.